those of us that for those of us that leave, excuse me, for those of us that work with teachers and bargaining groups on a daily basis, you know that they like being involved in the process. And so some of it is making decisions that need to take place over the summer while they're on summer break. And so one of the things that our superintendent, David Garcia, did is that he, as we started to prepare and plan for the year, out and spoke to 90% of our faculty. He personally picked up the phone and started making phone calls. And then so, you know, observing good leadership, I did the same thing. I picked up the phone and started calling all of our teaching staff just to listen and hear their concerns, which I'm glad that I did, because many of the teachers felt more comfortable sharing their concerns one-on-one. Sometimes I felt that the union fully representing all of their concerns, and so it may have been just a select few. And so as we began those conversations, we started identifying items that they felt were important and crucial to them as they returned to school. And like many of us, you know, they were concerned about their health. They were concerned about their well-being. They were concerned with the health of their families, the students that were sitting in front of them. And in our specific, our health department gave guidance of 3, 5, and 6 feet for social distancing. And as you know, there's a significant difference between 3 feet and 6 feet. And so, and that's 3 feet. So as we were looking at how many students we can fit and accommodate in classrooms, that's where the massive worry began with staff. Not only for them, but for me. I mean, I can't begin to imagine how I can justify with 30 kids in a classroom. And so, you know, the numbers got great in our region. We're in Stanislaus County. And so at that moment, our county decided, prior to the governor making his decision and announcement, that we weren't going to be any direct face-to-face interaction with students, that it would be through a social distancing platform. With that, an array of conversations with teachers. Well, what does that look like? And for those of us that implemented Distance Spring, there were success stories and there were some failures. And so for us, then the next step was reaching out to families and asking for their thoughts. What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And then also asking staff. Later on in this talk, we'll have an opportunity to just hear what we're doing with something that it's a term that's come back. It's called synchronous and asynchronous learning. It's a term that was used many years when we were distance learning within education. But we're looking at a synchronous model where our teachers are going to be returning back to their classroom. We're fortunate enough that every teacher at this school and in our district has their own respective classroom. And so they'll be providing instruction as if the students were physically in front of them in their seats via a social distancing platform through Google and the wonders of Zoom that we all know so well now. So with that, I do want to share a couple of questions that and provide some answers to a few of the questions that were shared earlier today. So the first question, how do you ensure families that their children will continue to receive the very best education possible, even though it'll look very different? And part of that is actually communicating with families. And so one thing that we've learned in our interaction and working with our families in the Empire Union School District is that many of our families come from marginalized families, disenfranchised families who may have not had a good experience themselves as students in their respective when they were in middle school or in high school. And so part of that is just sharing what our goal is and what our focus is. You know, we pride ourselves in saying that we not only address the academic needs of students, but we also focus on the emotional and social needs of students. And so with that, though, they have to hear it beyond an email. They have to hear it beyond reading it in a letter that we submit. So I was that this summer, I was able to receive 5 counseling interns. I have a background in counseling, and so I received 5 interns this summer, and we spent most of the summer reaching out to families and asking if they understood what something was, if they knew what distance learning was. And we spent time just doing the grassroots effort of communicating to families and explaining to them what a process would look like. You know, we also have to inform them and let them know that everything they hear in the news is legitimate as far as the number of cases. That the decisions made to close isn't necessarily a district decision or a school decision. There's a lot of very important people in the room making decisions for us during COVID-19. And so, but it's also an opportunity for listening to their concerns. Some of those concerns from our first responders, I'm going to need daycare. Both my spouse and I are first responders, and we're essential workers. And so how do you get childcare? What does that look like? And so what does instruction look like? And one of the errors I think many families have shared was that they felt that they were expected to be the teacher, if you will, during our spring semester, that we would push out assignments and that the parents would have to, in some, figure out A, the assignment, and B, trying to make it understandable for their children. And so that was a lesson learned. And so now all we're asking our families to do is provide a place where they can log in and then have in, like if they were in first period. And so we'll explain kind of the schedule that we've created. And in speaking to some administrators within our region, there's others that have looked very similar. And so we want to not only provide a safe place for our students and our families, but also provide some level of direct instruction. And then for those, if you remember back to your college days, we have established, and so with our middle school kids, though, that also includes a designated intervention and enrichment students. So some of the students at our age in middle school get a little when they hear office hours. So they think, oh, okay, am I expected, or am I going to be invited to that? And so now what we've done is just made it where we're inviting you to come. And so versus us waiting, because as you can imagine, we didn't get very many that were seeking us. And so we'll be assigning dates and times where kids are expected to check in with us during that office. Another question that came up was the ability to make complex things simple enough for all. And I think that's a problem in education for the most part, because we use so many acronyms and we use so much academic heavy language that sometimes we lose the most vital audience, and that being our families. And so one of the things that we've attempted to do, and we check each other as a school, in that we try to use language common and that it's understandable. We use a lot of examples. We use a lot of bullets. I remember when I would serve as an interpreter or a translator, and I was told to translate or interpret certain letters, a 2-page document, and I would shorten it to a 1-page document. And part of the reason for that is because there was a lot of jargon there that would lose folks. And so one of the things that I would encourage and is that the COVID-19 is extremely complicated. We have so many moving parts to this, and there's a lot of unknowns. But the one thing we do know is that we're in the business of educating students. We're in the business of serving families and providing of normalcy for families. And I think if we do it in a way where we don't lose sight of our charge, if we don't lose sight of our mission, and make it to where families fully understand what we're there to do, and make it and put it in ways that they understand. For example, synchronous learning, I can tell you right now, we have staff that still struggle with what the full definition of that is and what all the moving parts are. And so when we share that we not only say synchronous learning, we try to explain what the process looks like. So my advice is just to remember that, and not to lose sight that there's some folks that aren't educators. They're not, our families, depending on what communities you serve, you may have families who may not have a formal education or may not have had an education school. And so I think it's important for us to remember our audience and to make it as simple as possible. Another question was, my biggest worry are my parents who work and have no one to supervise. This is something we all struggle with. I like to think myself as a champion of equity and a champion of support of all families. I don't have an answer. I'd be interested in knowing if others are doing anything different, because this is an opportunity for others to also share either via the chat or forms of communicating with us. But we have provided daycare. We're provide daycare for childcare for our employees. We're looking at anyone within school age. So for us in our district, it's anyone TK up to 8, and giving them an opportunity to either send their child to a facility on campus, or that the teacher, if they have a medical concern for their children, that they can just keep them in their classroom. And that was just something that was just discussed just today as a result of our bargaining group seeking that as an option for families. So if anyone has any ideas of what they're doing with childcare, if that's open to other members of your respective communities, I'd look at, because it is something that we're trying to address as best as we can. A message with state guidelines. I'd like to share my screen for a second. I'm gonna. This was a difficult to find. We're all familiar with the governor's orders and recommendations and framework, a standard that was created. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and this will also be available to you if you look at it later. But it's a reference to some of the expectations for us. And it took some digging in the internet, but I'm going to share this with you as well. And so this particular document is just a social, it was created by Cal Matters. And so it just, and this, your communication with not only staff, but also with families. And it breaks it down. It's got a nice little visual, easy to read, but it gives the interactions on daily live interaction and what's required of schools within the state of California. You know, something as simple as taking attendance, you know, and how is that done? The big one for everyone is this one here, minutes of instruction, and what's the minimum number of minutes or hours that are expected by grade level. Ironically, I called the state for this information, and I was told we'll call you back. And so, you know, and so there's frustrating moments as we plan or get an answer. And so this document has really helped in the last 2 days of conversing with teachers and parents, serving students in need, and what does that look like specifically for this ed or others with non-traditional needs. No live instruction. So for us, you know, I mentioned that we're using synchronous learning, and there's other platforms out, but part of that also requires some training. And so to our opportunity for our teachers to receive not only synchronous training and what that looks like with all the technology within their classrooms, but then also we're going to be spending some time prior to our students arriving Zoom meetings. Even in this process here for this PLC, we spent just preparing and how to share a screen and making sure that if you have co-hosts that the system together and everyone's kind of understands their role. And that's specifically important, especially if you're going to have paraprofessionals being within the classroom or via distance learning. Preventing disengagement, and then the others are here. And so I can share this. We have it in our drive, but if you're interested, just do this, then we'll make sure to share this as well. But and this speaks to the point about having something consistent. And so if you refer and pull from the standards, I think at that moment, you can continue to relay a message to all of your stakeholders. But it's important that also that you don't lose sight of your classified staff. That's one thing that I learned in speaking to our classified staff today, is that some of them don't check email, either because they don't have their cell phones linked to their email. They may not have a computer that's ever assigned to them, or they don't have a personal computer at home. And so they've spent most of the summer unsure what's taking place. And so in speaking to them today, they had this sense of relief that their position will continue to exist, and that they themselves will have a position. And now it's just a matter of figuring out what their role is. I can share what our classified staff is going to be doing, but it's a bargaining issue. It's a district issue. And so it's going to go to all of our districts. Scott, I'm going to keep going down the questions thing on the chat for questions.
I'd like to chime in on a few if now is a good time.
Sure, John, go ahead.
To our employees bring their own children on campus? That's a big question for us as well. We have created a process for our employees to identify and confirm care hardship. And then at that point, what we have come up with is a courtesy agreement, which will allow them to bring their child to their own classroom and or a workspace. But it has to be a workspace that is not a common area at all. It has to have an exterior entrance and exit. They have to be, their child has to be in the room with them at all times. If the child is outside the classroom, they have to be escorted. They have to maintain social distancing. They have to, of course, be masked up when they're outside. We also have created a family entrance and exit, and we are creating a family restroom so that there will not be minglings for those parents that are bringing their children. And it is an agreement that says if you violate this once, courtesy is over. So it's a two-step process because we have to have them confirm that it is a hardship. What we want many people to do is really exhaust all their resources before they ask to bring their children to school. And then we have a pretty set guidelines in regards to you get to see if you can continue to follow these directives. And that's gone over very well. We had 14 of our employees that were going to have to ask for the COVID leave because of childcare. And since we made this announcement, we now have 8 that are going to be under this courtesy, and we have only 1 that is asking for the COVID leave. So we believe that there's a gain with allowing the teachers to come on campus and do their work.
John, is that only for school-age children or all children?
No, we're not putting an age on it. Actually, if they're 14 or older, we want them to have there needs to be a condition such as an IEP or a serious medical condition, or that child really cannot be home and the doctor could provide notification. And really, we haven't had any pushback. We do actually have some of our employees who are upset that children will be on the campus, but children are going to be not seen and not heard. So that's our, that's our solution to it. We just couldn't start the year with any long-term substitutes for distance learning. It just wasn't going to work. We couldn't do that to our community.
Yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal idea. I know that, it's, and speaking to a couple of teachers who shared just some concerns, and our response from our superintendent is we'll have to do our very best to limit that would prevent our teachers from coming to school. The last thing we want is for our teachers to say, A, I don't feel comfortable, B, I don't have anyone to watch my children, so I'm more concerned about my children than my students. And so in doing that, I think it helps alleviate that and then provide an opportunity for us to provide some level of having the kids do it on their own. As we know, it just isn't just working for our children. And John, for your efforts in that.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more complicated for us and the 32 counties that have that, because the governor made the decision that all the schools are closed. So now that daycare is gone, school is gone, and we do have lots of our teachers and lots of our employees whose students go to our schools or other schools, neighboring schools.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to solve an issue that we didn't bring upon our employees, and they know that. But again, we have to work collaboratively, and we have to find out what's in the best interest of the students that we're educating. And then my other thought was in regards to the classified employees. We developed an MOU that basically said other duties as this going to be challenged very much by the union. We promised that we wouldn't have our yard duty people doing electrical work or other kinds of things like that, but certainly our bus get paid and we want them to get paid. So we're coming up with other duties as assigned for them, such as detailing buses, doing easy, simple cleaning, clerical work. We call it clerical work, custodial work, non-skilled labor, or other duties as assigned. We are also, all of us distribution, so we could get hands on deck for food distribution as well. So that's just some ideas that we have.
Yeah. John, just if I can note, with our bus drivers, we're actually going to be providing bus route distribution students that, you know, we don't want them walking more than a block. And so, that's one way of A, what's bus drivers going to do, and B,
Yeah.
how do we get food to our children?
Right.
And so the other thing that we're trying to do is have standardized lunchtime for the entire district. And so as we distribute, there's no instruction, and that lunch all comes at a certain hour. And so that was something that I applaud our teachers for doing. They came up with that on their own. And so and originally we were thinking, okay, we'll have this route and this time, and then, but we're teaching. And so you can't have kids computer to go get their meal. And but again, John, I applaud you and your district for what you're doing with your staff, your family.
Can we open this up to our other participants now and see if anyone else would like to share what's happening in their district?
Absolutely.
Anybody just chime on in? Want to share? Don't be shy.
I can share. I
Great,
think
thanks.
for those, it's hard to be shy.
Absolutely.
I am, my name is Bhavna Narula. I'm a principal at Clark Intermediate School in Los Altos School District, so about 40 miles ago. What we are doing is we are obviously all starting, we are also on the watch list, so we are also starting in 100% distance format, but I'm building a master's can be flexible enough that I can transition to hybrid when we do go to hybrid, because that is our intent. That's where we are landing, is eventually getting kids in a hybrid model, an A-B co. So my thinking is that we are on master schedule. I mean, I used to focus, I have co-teaching on campus. I used to focus on common preps for co-teachers, but the way we are building the master schedule is we daily live instruction, but then Wednesday is dedicated to just an advisory check-in and independent work while teachers have time to collaborate. So I didn't have to worry about preps and common preps in a manner. So I'm building sort of a more traditional master schedule without having to worry about prep, common prep times and things like that. So that's been helpful. And as far as safety is concerned, I have a site safety and operations team that's kind of working on like non-classroom settings safety, and again thinking about the hybrid model when we do event and what we need, you know, kind of planning the schedule, staggering lunch times and all of that good stuff, and that has helped me. That has helped lower staff anxiety about coming back. A lot of staff members who are very anxious about coming back. But I would be curious because we also committed to synchronous learning as when we read learning format. I'm just curious how folks are kind of handling that. How are you training your staff? How are you scheduling that? I'm very curious about how you're supporting your staff.
You're on mute.
Thank you. One of the things that we've done is that, you know, platforms, you want to be able to utilize the platforms that they hopefully will be using. And so one of the errors that we made at the beginning is that we wanted our teachers using Google Meet only because of some of the safety features that we all heard of were taking place early on. And so we went through and bought the upgraded version. So we bought the Alexas, if you will. So now teachers, they've participated as participants in Zoom, but now they're as host. And so we've created little mini videos for them. And so that way they can reference back at their own time. They also log in, and then we do a synchronous learning exam in order for the teachers to see how it's done, not only from the student's view, but then also from their view. And then the other thing that we've just recently requested is student ghost accounts. So then that way teachers can view, student would view from their monitor, from their computer. Because sometimes they may not have all the bells and whistles or device. And so the other thing that we've done is that our computer technicians will be if the teacher's comfortable and the social distancing platform. So, we always have to say that in mind and keep that work with staff. But our computer techs, if the teacher's comfortable, would go into their classroom and within the social distancing platform and framework, they would then show them how to use the devices. And so one of the things unique is that all of our classrooms have large screen televisions. And so, but the concern that I want to be able to see all of my participants. So as you know, if you've ever hosted a screen, a Zoom meeting, your screen can only accommodate so many folks before you have to then tab over. And so what we did is we just added another screen. That way they can see all 30 of their students, 35 of their students within 2 screens. The other thing that we've asked is that, because we all have student aides that are usually as an elective. And so our student aides, when they rooms, their responsibility is to oversee the chat room. And so part of it is just letting the teacher know, so someone has a question, because as you can imagine, all 35 trying to raise their hand at the same time kind of gets a little. And so if we have someone, like even in this meeting, there's 2 folks taking a look at the chat room. And so we want to be able to provide that for the teachers. And so the other piece is making our teachers very Google friendly. If you're not comfortable with Google is a genius, and they have so many platforms and so many opportunities for us to interact with via a social distance learning platform for free. That be able to provide some training with that. And then part of it is also one thing that I've learned in my years as a school administrator is that if you have teachers find it themselves and they like it, they want to roll with it and they want to run with it. If you find it and you give it to them, it may not go very far. But then part of it is encouraging your teachers, look, what else can you find online and what's out there? And so there's one called Slip Just Found. It's available for 30 days, no cost. It's an add-on, but in essence, what it does, it allows you to share your screen via Zoom, but then in your presentations, you just keep to one presentation. So a student can have a culmination of slide presentations on one document versus having to go through, and if you've ever done this, where you have to go through your drive and then it's like, what's the file called and where is it? We can just create one massive file and we just keep adding our slide presentations to that one document. And so again, it's called Slip and Slide. I'm not in any way paid by Google, but it's just an opportunity for us to look at those. The other thing is there, you may have it within your respective districts and your school sites, you may have tech experts. And so one of the things that we've done as a result of not having athletics is that athletic budget, and I identified a tech lead in every department now. In the past, we've had 2. So now we have 6 tech leads at Glick Middle School that only serve 6, but there's now 6 tech leads. And so now our tech leads now serve as the primary source of information for teacher training on site. Because if you've ever tried to find a computer technician to come running to you very fast. And so if you have a tech issue, the one thing we're trying to eliminate is any level of frustration for teachers trying to do distance learning. And then, the last thing we want is for teachers to get frustrated and shut down their computer. At that moment, the more it is an expense, right? Because there is a stipend assigned to it, but that's an investment that you can move money around as a result of not having things like leadership or a dance. And so, so we have to play with, I think, in this regard, that we can just shuffle things around. There was one question that I want to make sure that I answer. So there was a question regarding how support staff also assists with, and so I can't speak to all districts in the state of California, but for us, we haven't done any layoffs. There is no talk of any furloughs. Everyone that was on staff last year is coming back. As John Curry mentioned, it's just going to look different, but they're going to continue to receive a paycheck. And so our classified staff, our paraprofessionals, so the old traditional aid, classroom aid, the paraprofessionals, their role, just like they would in the classroom, they would lead after direct instruction. They would just do a breakaway group within Zoom. Some of our classrooms are large enough where there could be 2 adults, just one side of the room. One teacher asked, can I just put a partition between me and my aide? Sure, absolutely. And so we put in a curtain in the room. And so She stands on one side, he stands on the other side. And so in essence, we've created 2 classrooms. And so the advantages that we have within technology, I think you can provide that platform. But again, we have to be mindful, it has to lead the instruction. It's just a matter of then the paraprofessional providing support. Our counseling staff, and we have a phenomenal group of counselors. One of the things that we've done in our schedule is that we provided a 1 hour of time where it could be 1 or 2 things. I mentioned office hours. It could also be intervention. It could also be enrichment. But it can also be a social emotional period of time where that time is dedicated for either the counselors to run their, it could be an opportunity for some of our teachers who are really big on social emotional learning, conduct their workshops. It's also an opportunity for our clubs and organizations to continue to meet. And so one of the things that I do is to ensure that we still focus on that social emotional need of a student and get them active. One of my teachers who trying to get to run a club for many years finally volunteered, and she's going to run a reading group. She's an English language specialist, and she wants to read. And so it's like, okay, well, that's fine. So she now has a reading club. And I think you just have to get creative. Our yard duty staff is going to help with childcare. And so they're going to flip because with middle school students and not ankle biters. And so when they see the little ones running around, like, what am I supposed to do? Just make sure no one gets hurt. I mean, at the end of the day, right? That's really what we want. And so I think it's just looking at that creativity, and I think just needing to be flexible. I think, as I work with some of our classified staff, it's like, look, what are your essential functions? Okay, you can't do that anymore. What are you willing to do? And can you do X? No? Can you do Y? I can do Y. Okay, you're into the time that we are away from our babies. As soon as the babies come back, you go back to your regular role. And so I do, in this conversation right now, it's only for our social distancing that we have right now. Our bargaining group wanted to talk about what's hybrid going to look like. And our superintendent told them, we're not going to talk about that right now. Let's just agree to this and let's try this for a week or two. And then once we are ready to, let's go back to the drawing table and then discuss what that looks like once we have a hybrid model. Who comes when? What days do we serve? What are the hours? Let's just survive the first week of school. Let's get computers into our kids' hands. And so let's check in with them. Many of our kids we haven't seen in 5 months. And so I think it's important to just focus on that, focus on what we know. And we know that we're going to open school via a social distance back structure. And so I think that's where we need to focus our. Does anyone have any questions or concerns specific with communicating directly with families? One of the tools that we use is by anybody. I'm paid by Empire Union, but Parent Square is a great tool that is used. And so if you don't have a platform or a communication to use with families, we use it. I know many schools in our Read Square, and I have absolutely zero concerns with it. For those of you that work with high school students, Parent Square also has something called Student Square, and it works very similarly. All you need is a student cell phone, and I would argue that none of them all have a cell phone number, that they can then just communicate with you and you can communicate with them. It eliminates the Remind 101, and it's a captured audience because you can send messages to them. We've made a request for students to get Student Square simply because sometimes our families do not read the message. And we were relying on our families to send a message to their child, do your math homework. And from the student that their parents never shared the message. They never heard what page. They never heard when it was due from their families. And so now we're trying to eliminate, sometimes you have families who have social emotional issues themselves, and the last thing they're going to do is check a message. So we're trying to eliminate that by using Parent Square and Student Square. But I'm curious if any others have communication platforms or tools that they've used to communicate during this time with families and or students.
So we use a lot of social media platforms, and then we use Instant Connect and Peachjar at our school. And then I emails to my parents through those platforms.
Is there one out of one of those social media platforms, is there one that the kids like the most?
Instagram.
Instagram, okay.
Things that we don't use.
Well,
But the one they like that we use the most is Instagram. Parents like Facebook and Twitter, but kids like Instagram.
well, if you're familiar with TikTok, one of the things that we've talked create. So I mean, we like having social events here, but another reason that we're looking at TikTok is being able to create our own TikTok world, and so that way kids can subscribe to us and we can share method. And that was a suggestion that was brought up by our student leadership, that why don't we use TikTok? The concern, just like many of you have, is like, well, who's gonna supervise that? Well, that could be a function that we now give somebody who may not have outside of the daily instruction. And so something that we're looking at, if anyone's ever used TikTok for that purpose, let me know. If anyone ever wants to compete against Glick Middle School in TikTok competitions, just because we can't have rallies, so that's going to be our virtual rally. So if you're interested in having a challenge against Glick Middle School, bring it.
We stopped using TikTok because there's security consideration.
Jennifer, do you as a site administrator, are you the one watching the social media platforms, or is that an assignment you give someone else?
Counselors and my activities director. So there's 3 people that do that.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Can I ask a quick question? You were talking about how you're being creative, you're checking in with staff about what they can do now that you're kind of model. I mean, I'm not specifically talking about support staff and para staff. Now, you had individual conversations with all of your teachers, but as you also did with your paras, or did you send out a survey and ask them what you thought, this conversation?
Sunny, thank you for asking. No, actually, so this meeting, I left at 3:45. I finished my last conversation with our last classified staff member at 3:30 today. And so part of it is, the beast is always the teachers union, right? That's always the big one. And so you have them because everything else kind of plays off of that. And so now that I knew what we were doing with instruction and what instruction was going to look like, then we can start having roles. But I spoke to each one personally, and I called them directly from my cell phone, have a conversation. And so we have a good working relationship with them. And so they're not scheduled to come back until next week, but they now know that when I come back to school a week ahead of my return date, I kind of know what the game. And so they appreciated. Some of them didn't like the role, but then then you're honest with them. Look, if you're concerned, if there's health issues, here's the steps that you take. Here's the documents that you need to bring. Have a week before we start school to prepare. And so, because no one wants any surprises, because some of our literally show up the first day of school. And then it's like, oh, I'm here. And so, so I wanted to eliminate that. It is time consuming. I mean, I spent starting at 8 a.m. till 3:30, but you have very rich, powerful conversations with folks, and they feel valued and appreciated. And it's something that's just, it's worth the investment. I are blowing up my phone right now as we're talking because they probably have a follow-up question, but I'll entertain those and their questions as soon as we get done. But it's important to have them. No one has time to do them, and I recognize that, but it's, something that many things that I've learned from my superintendent is that you have to be really good with interacting with people, and you have to be willing to at least hear their concern. And if you're willing to do that and invest the time, you're going to have an employee who's at least going to appreciate the fact that you did that. Sunny, I hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much. County office position where I'm going to be reaching out and coaching principals. And so, I mean, I was an administrator in the past as well, but I do believe that you do need to be really in tune with your staff, especially with go now, so that you can start on like a common understanding. So I just wanted to hear how you're doing that. And yeah, you acknowledge that it is time consuming, but it is an investment. So
yeah, you're welcome. Sunny, I will never make the claim that I'm the smartest person in the room, but I can tell you I'll be one of the friendliest. And that's just something that people have to remember, that we work with staff and we work with humans. And at the end of the day, during COVID, people are just, at the unprofessional term, but people are just freaking out. And so I think it's important for us to hear and listen and have a great idea that we haven't thought about.
Has anybody, when we were talking about communities, have any of you utilized Minga? Anybody heard of Minga? I'm scrolling through so my
Bree, we lost you.
Mute. Sorry, am I back? So it's only so can see it. So we still have Instagram, we still have Facebook for all of the things that the district tells us to, you know, post this and post that. But every post is screened for any kind of inappropriate language or anything ahead of time. Parents can view, but they can't comment. So it's only for students. And then there's opportunities for teachers to have their individual kind of Minga situation. So it's something we're going to try this year because Instagram and Facebook has been tricky. We're in a huge district, and so anyway, we're going to try Minga for communication and as an additional communication tool to highlight things that are going on our campus.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My my superintendent asked me sometimes, like for Student Square, for example, right? Not all students are going to have a cell phone, and I wrote, you know, he likes pushing my equity button a lot, and so he asked, you know, well, how do you feel about the equity issue that you're creating with communicating with some and some don't? And so my response to that is, I think the more platforms you have, reach out more people potentially. But if you stick to one form of communication, you're going to miss a lot of people. And, you know, and so sometimes families change their cell phones, and the kids may be the most mature person, the most active person in that house. And so if that child happens to have a cell phone and that's the way we can communicate, I think the more, the better. And so I appreciate Jinga because I wrote it down. Minga, I wrote it down, and I'm going to do some research as soon as we're done. One of the things I want to make sure that we talk about this next piece is just how do we communicate with families. And so one of the thoughts, and I don't know if anyone's done this yet, and this just came to me this morning, and this was an idea by the classified staff. Would you be willing to have, this is a question posed to me, would you be willing to have a Zoom families? And so I kind of struggled with the answer. And so one of the things that we are looking at considering is having a Zoom opportunity where maybe everyone's control as the host. You can control whether or not you allow people to turn on their mics or not, because you never know what questions are going to get thrown at you or what anyone's going to say. And so I think it's just an opportunity for families to see us and to hear us, and then to be able to get the message, log on, and to hopefully see the sincerity in our voices and to hear the passion that we have for their children. And so done any form of communication that way with families in rolling out their opening plans?
So this is Bob. Done any, I mean, our district has been centrally doing the rollouts of the hosting town halls. We have one tonight as well. But my intention starting the 1st of August is to do video messages. I did that over spring, and that was very well received because families were getting a lot of, everything was online. So I kind of did video, they heard the tone, and I did weekly messages for kids that way too. And through the course of the distance learning in spring, I believe every 3 weeks I did like a survey with students, and had my like focus groups with kids to see how they were receiving. And then I shared those results with teachers. And that actually motivated teachers to do surveys of their own with kids too, to see how they were receiving. But the video went farther. I mean, I hear you. I think families are getting so much information that they stop for a while. And we think it's so important to communicate with them. But the video, and even if the video said, you know, check like these 4 points in my message below, get their attention.
Thank you. I appreciate what platform, the video, the messaging video that you used.
So I used Screencast. I found it very user-friendly. You know, I tried videos under 3 minutes, 30 seconds. As it's under 2 minutes because attention span. But I found and actually bought a subscription for my entire staff, and they've been able to use it as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Bhavna, kind of Screencastify.
Yeah.
So I have a staff of about 5 teachers,
Mhm.
and I've got teachers that are saying, or I need GoFormative, or I need this, or I need that. And obviously I can't afford to access to all of these things. But one of the things, so we sent out a survey to say, which of these can you not live without, right? And some people wrote, I need Screencastify, Edpuzzle, Nearpod, GoFormative, and every single So I'm just curious for you, Bhavna, you said you bought licenses for all of your site, but I'm just kind of curious what other things people are buying subscriptions or licenses for, and if there's, I mean, obviously the buying licenses district-wide, so I'm just kind of curious specifically about Screencastify, but then about anything else that feels like is absolutely essential.
Yeah, so my approach, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and we often get requested some of those things, and my district isn't buying any subscriptions either. My approach always has been Screencastify kind of emerged as a need for my staff because they wanted voiceovers, like if they were doing slide presentations, record videos. They had a QuickTime player, and it was some. And so I bought that. But then I did have staff who wants to try, like they have used Flipgrid. One of my teachers wanted to try Edpuzzle. So I let buying it like as a site license. I kind of funded like an individual license for her to try, that she will share with the entire staff what her experience has been with them. And then and then another one wanted to use Classcraft, I suppose, a history teacher who also, I did the same thing. I just bought a subscription for him, and that was reasonable. And the reason I was able to apply for the entire staff was because during the spring learning, they were running like a special, and it was super discounted. They were willing to work with educators, find solutions for them. And so I have it now that's, expiring. So it expires next July. But I found it super useful. Some of you use Screencast-O-Matic also, but Screencastify is integratable. You can, upload it to YouTube. It's quicker and sort of user-friendly is what I feel the biggest advantage was.
$1,000 for your entire site?
You know what? I think I paid $750 because they were running some kind of a special.
Thank you.
Can I
I'm a
share?
bargain.
You guys, Loom, Loom, does Screencastify, and it's free for teachers. And it's very, very user-friendly. And then Edpuzzle is awesome. And it also has, the feature is it has closed captioning for our students. And it's very easy to put your Edpuzzle. It also has an accountability feature. Like if you put videos onto Edpuzzle and you put questions and assessments, the kids have to go through the videos and finish them before they get to the questions. And so you could document their time on it. It's one of my favorite applications, but I did buy some other items for my teaching.com. We didn't have that before. And I also bought Edulastic for my academic teachers because it has some anti-cheating things. And I did the premium for just academic teachers with $100. So for me, it was $3,600 for my academic teachers only because it has some anti-cheating features, the premium version, because I'm looking for anti-cheating things that, so if anybody has any ideas there, we've looked into what the colleges use, but there's us, and for minors, There's a lot, we can't use any of the things the colleges use because you cannot videotape students. And so we're still looking for resources for assessment purposes. But we also, my teachers use Flipgrid. We also use GoFormative, and then we're just finding that all of our teachers use Google Classroom as the platform that they put their technology applications, their lessons on. So that's where we're at. But technology, I'm spending my vacation because we're not going anywhere, and I'm spending my money from conferences on technology. So
I have
Thank you.
one solution for assessment, but I don't know if my video is okay to have enough video. Can you get this?
Yeah.
So we use our aides, our aides, and you could probably train like bus drivers and other folks who aren't going to be busy to do like proctored exams over Zoom. Shows like a very simple online assessment through Renaissance, the STAR test for reading. Takes like 15 minutes. We did it, certain grade levels that we thought could handle it. We did like 3rd grade and above. And that worked. I mean, it takes a little bit of human power, but that worked. Just like you share your screen and they can control it if they have the right type of computer. And if they don't, you them and you share your screen so that they can at least see it and they just tell you what to answer. And we weren't sure. We did it as a test at the end of last year just to see if it was even feasible. It went really well.
we did that in summer school meeting. So I don't know.
We did over Zoom, so the adults like looking right at them. Still had cheating?
Jennifer, one of the things so we have Mix, and then there's also a competitor called Guardian, and so that allows teachers to oversee this. And so we're going to do a quick test on Monday to see if we can do it from away from. So I'll let you know how that goes. But in essence, you get to see the student screen during assessments because we administer the NWEA assessment. And so we want to be able to measure students' math and reading skills and see how much they've lost since the last assessment. And so I'll let you know how that goes.